the origin story for the Patriot Act.
All
Yeah,
right.
but
Let's
because
bring
you
in our guest because she's waiting. We can talk about this shit all day. I mean, Jesus Christmas, um, Lord. Thank you guys again for all the birthday love. Love to have this guest on right now. I think a lot of people are going to say, "Oh, you're just bringing on Sarah because you guys have been critical sometimes of what's going on in the trans community and whatnot, and so you're just trying to make yourself look good by bringing on a non-woke transgender person and stuff." But it's not the case. I
it's
met
just that the
Sarah.
woke transgender people won't talk to us anymore.
Well, all right. So,
So
but I met Sarah briefly at Freedom Fest. We both did. We were there. Um, we met briefly over there, but then I got to really talk to Sarah at the Rage Against the War Machine rally where she spoke, and it was pretty awesome meeting her there because it was just one of those situations where we can put everything aside. Obviously we had the Mises Caucus, the Libertarians with us, anti-imperialist leftists, or whatever the hell you want to call us, and anybody out there who really wanted to speak out against the war machine and what they do. So that's where we exchanged information. We formed some type of friendship, and now she is here with us today, ladies and gentlemen. Sara Higdon is on AM Wake Up.
What's up? How are you? Happy birthday!
Thank you. I appreciate that. How are you doing? How are you feeling? I heard you had the flu.
Oh, yeah, I'm doing okay. I've been sweating this fever out all night. I'm good though. I mean, I did an interview when I had COVID last year, so I'm good to go.
So I did bring a clip from your tweeter. It's one of the pinned ones, I think, or the one up there. I think it was the part with, I don't know if it was the Newsmax one or the other one, which is the one I think you were conversing with another podcaster of sorts. But let me play it really quickly because I think it would be good to get to the audience to watch this. I've been telling a lot of people that this is going to be an interesting show. We've received some shit from some people sometimes when we have talked about some of the trans community and some of the things that they were pushing as far as what they thought was appropriate. I come from the Bernie Sanders crowd, right? I lived in California as a leftist, progressive, whatever. So there were people inside the trans community that I've met, and there was this stigma on how you should act, on how to be an ally, on how to speak, whatnot. And I really thought it was a little bit over the top. Like I just thought it was really kind of demeaning. I thought it's kind of demeaning the way they say that to be an ally to black people, how you have to treat black people. It's just really unnatural of sorts. And I think it's more like backdoor racist than it is really, being an ally or a friend to a black person in the community.
Yeah. Well, that was the whole point. I wrote an op-ed. It was published last Saturday in Human Events, and that was kind of the focal point of it, because that is exactly what we're seeing right now. We're seeing that leftists have made the trans community essentially, they're being transphobic because they're using us to push like a postmodern Marxist ideology.
Okay, let's bring this in really quickly. Let's take a look at this clip and then we'll dive into it. Guys, thank you so much for supporting the show. Thank you, Sarah, for coming on today. Let's take a little quick gander and then we'll dive right into it.
The left has been pushing, they've co-opted the trans community, and they are pushing the narrative, and it ties in again with CRT and queer theory, except for with CRT, they had to get black people to get on board with pushing their agenda. With queer theory, you just have to self-identify into this category, destroy the name of trans people, and then when you've destroyed the name and nobody wants to listen to you anymore, then you just choose a new identity.
Yeah, I feel like this whole trans activist mob thing is going to go very badly for trans people who are just trying to go about their lives and exist. And instead what's going to happen is they're going to be cordoned off. People are going to be made to believe that they're all violent activists and what have you. And the same kind of thing happened with the BLM riots, which you noted, and the protests. And I remember seeing an Instagram post from, I forget who it was, but it was a throwback Instagram post. And it was basically like, the time me and my girlfriend ran into a BLM protest and there were no Black people at all.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of stuff I saw in Brooklyn, and it was just a whole bunch of white people, you know, like at these protests. There were no Black people, and it's like, who are you guys protesting for? You know, what are you doing?
Well, and it's obvious that they're not protesting for trans people, because if you are trans and you speak out, they shut you down. Like I noted in there, I've had 3 events where Antifa has tried to shut my events down.
Sarah,
I went to a Black Lives Matter protest in Santa Cruz because I wanted to see. And to their credit, the 35 Black people in Santa Cruz were also there, but predominantly white. Yeah, hilarious too, by the way.
Yeah, and this is kind of in response. So I wrote the piece in response to what happened to Riley Gaines in San Francisco last weekend, and then as well what happened to Kelly J. Keane in New Zealand a couple weekends ago. When you look at the activists in those, like when you look at the videos, I'm like none of these people are trans. Like you can usually tell like the leftist trans people because they want you to know that they're trans, you know, and so like very few of them are.
Are they putting you? Is the leftist progressive movement putting transgender people in danger? Or not? I don't want to say necessarily put you in danger, but like bastardizing what you feel and what you want to express inside. I think you said something on the Newsmax interview to the point is like these people are saying all this shit, so now they're actually causing more problems. They're not helping.
Yeah,
they're hurting. Can you give us a little insight to that kind of thought process and what the left is doing to actual people who, you know, just want to live their life and not, you know?
Yeah, well, they're creating this perception about trans people that we are these crazy activists, right? So when you look at like the overcorrection and you look at the pendulum swings and stuff like that, you see that the leftists are making us look like we are these crazy activists that just need to be, you know, silenced and everything like that. And so like your social conservatives will end up, you know, going so far the other direction that they'll be like, no, we're going to go, you shouldn't even have the ability to do this stuff. We're going to take all of your rights away. You should be put into a mental institution. We should take all your guns away. Like that's what we're seeing those types of narratives play out on some of the conservative side of things right now.
So there seems to be a whole bunch of different things that are going on all at once in terms of pushing particular agendas and narratives. The overriding one, though, is guaranteed division, and at every conceivable level, because there are people who are trans who are just like, man, shut these fucking idiots up. Like, and there's people who are like, you know, who will be on. I don't give a fuck who you are. There are probably multiple times throughout the day where you're going to disagree with yourself on something, let alone anyone at all. And the idea that any community is a monolith or any type of fucking choice that you make that other people have made that would put you in a group, whether or not you want to be identified by that group, is somehow, you know, the sum total of all of your thoughts, wants, hopes, desires, and needs is fucking retarded. And I just wish that people could unlearn that behavior. But again, as part of that overarching propaganda, you just got to make people hate people, because if you look at why you're being made to hate, then you're going to be mad at the person who's making you do that.
Well, they want to play team sports, and this is what goes back to, again, like Pasta said, when we were at the Rage Against the War Machine rally. I mean, that was 2 very different groups coming together in support of one thing, but they can't have that. You know, the 2 sides can't have that. They need division. They can't have people coming together on single issue advocacy stuff. Otherwise, that's how they lose. And so they have to keep us divided. And you know, it ends up becoming like a cult because like the people that go against the cult's narrative, they go hard and they try to, you know, silence people from leaving that cult.
Yeah. Anytime that you think it's okay to speak for any marginalized group out there, you yourself are guilty of being racist or misogynistic or whatever you're claiming that the general public is, then you think you can speak for this other person. I've witnessed rallies where white men have stood up and say, how dare you speak about that black man like that? He's black. You should never speak to him like that. And I'm like, dude, this black man's trying to speak up for himself and you're speaking over him. Don't you see you're being as racist as can be? So, I mean,
yeah, well, they call them Uncle Toms. They call me transphobic. I've been called a TERF. I get called names all the time. Like I get called a traitor. I get called now the new one is pick me. So if you're just trying to get picked by, you know, the people that are on the other side, you're not actually, you know, based. You're doing this just to be picked, you know, just to be picked to be the token of a group. But what people don't realize is, I mean, I think a lot. I mean, I think in the trans community, what we see is a very small minority. I mean, but that's how it always happens. Is like 8% of any group creates the narrative or the perception of an entire group.
Yeah. What are your thoughts? There's so many ways to go. And Steve, jump in any time, please. What are your thoughts? I think the big issue for a lot of people is the sporting issue, right? Like we were talking about Riley. She went through this whole situation where, you know, this gentleman who transitioned over to a woman was like ranked number 400 for men. And then he transitions into a woman and she's now the champion. What are your thoughts as far as, because I don't, you know, when people ask me this question, I usually like to say, well,
I'm still trying to figure out what the transition really is, because dude's still got a dick and balls. Like, just it's the identification, or got, like, I mean, serious, like, I'm not even not joking at all. Like, it just now homies Leah or whatever, and everyone's just supposed to be because I mean, it really is Alex Stein in a one piece at that point, you know, going, no, I'm a better swimmer than you. Where's my medal?
And by the way, too, as well, Steve, somebody just broke the weightlifting record. It was, you know, he just identified as a woman, and
that's what I'm saying. Like, I mean, and I'm not, and I really honestly I don't know, because I didn't look too hard into the Leah Thomas thing at all.
Yeah. So Leah Thomas, in order for swimming, Leah Thomas had to be on hormones for a year prior, and actually have testosterone levels that are below 50 nanomilliliters, and before they were able to compete in swimming. But I'm against all males competing in female sports. As the studies are showing more and more, is that you can never erase the biological advantage that comes with going through male puberty. It's impossible. Like, there's so much that you gain during that time, and then your muscle memory, it's still there. I mean, I personally have seen this myself, just being an athlete my whole life and just going to the gym and being like, I didn't really lose a ton. And then when you look, especially Leah Thomas is actually a prime example of this, because as you noted, Leah Thomas was ranked like 460 and then went to number 1 in the female category, where the average difference in times between elite athletes in swimming between male and female college swimmers is 11% difference in performance. So females generally swim 11% slower, and Leah Thomas only lost 2.3% of her performance when she transitioned. And so that alone shows you that you can't just erase biological advantages. You know, it's insane. Now it's all different sporting categories are kind of they're all starting to set their own rules, and some are going with, it's almost like they're going to the two extremes, whereas a lot are going to all out bans, which and creating possible third categories for trans people. And then others are going to the full self-ID model, which, as you noted, a man just self-identified and just, broke the weightlifting record in I can't remember where that was, but I mean, it was like Zuby did the same thing. Zuby broke the deadlifting record for his weight class in the UK, just like without even trying. So it was like, it will ruin, women's sports. Actually, US rowing is another one that went full self ID, and I have a friend who is a Olympic rower. Actually, does really wins a lot of gold medals that I go to the gym with. And I actually, when this came out, I asked him, I joked with him, I said, are you just planning on rowing for the rest of your life now until you die? Because as soon as you can't win in the men's category, you can simply self-ID into the women's category and keep competing.
So let me ask this question, Sarah, so we understand this, because for Leah, she had to take a certain test to make sure her testosterone level dropped beyond a certain, I don't know how they set the bar for that. I don't know who makes that decision. Like, this is the testosterone bar. But if it dropped down even lower, would you then be okay if it got to a certain level? Or is it, once you've had testosterone in your body, muscle memory, it still will make it unfair no matter what?
Yeah, as soon as you go through puberty, it's automatically going to be unfair. Like, you're going to already have that advantage. And there's studies out of the UK that show that there's no way to eliminate that biological advantage. Even in like board sports and stuff like that, they've shown like hip angle and stuff like that makes women more prone to injuries and makes it harder, just different body shape angles as well. And then like lung capacity and stuff like that, I guess, is stuff that you just can't get rid of, no matter what, how low your testosterone levels go.
Steve, did you have something, brother?
Well, that's the rub too, because that's where parents going, no, my kid's definitely not a boy or a girl. Let's go ahead and put them on puberty blockers, and then let's start this process ahead of time comes into play. And then that really does sort of eliminate the right of that kid to because look, man, I have kids. I've known for a very long time that my brain wasn't fully developed until I was 26. There are things that I would definitely have done differently, having known that at a much earlier age. There's things that I have proof of concept in my kids that I've done well with, but based on knowing that. To add to that, there's this culture of the perpetual child that has been sort of like they tried to do it with Gen X. They have successfully done it pretty well with the following generations, where you don't ever really have to grow up. You can play video games all day. You can, do this. You can check out all day. There's a basement for you. There's a couch for you, whatever, don't worry. It's covered. And then at the end of the day, there's a nanny state that's going to swoop in on occasion and throw you a couple of bones. You'll be all right. Go spend it on some digital Beanie Babies and get diamond hands. You're going to be a king of crypto land or whatever, king of the metaverse and all that kind of shit. Wow, I just got off on a tangent there. I'm sorry.
Do you remember your question?
What I've seen is this is kind of where it's going. What I've seen is in like a long-term transhumanist agenda with this. And what I've also seen is a like deliberate push on the part of the media, on the part of, even independent media, to sort of make the 1980s style Christian Coalition rant about the trans community in general, that these were all going to be a bunch of pedophiles, to make that happen. it seems like there has been an overriding agenda over a fairly short period of time to find the worst possible representatives and to create a situation where you're putting legitimate predators in front of children as representatives of any community. And I don't know why there isn't in general a larger pushback in the independent media against this, but especially like is it fear of pushback in general for any time you stick your neck out and talk about this, or there's not enough people who are trans who are like, yo, this is dumb, can we stop this? Is there, you know, like where's the I don't know, coordinated pushback, I guess.
Yeah. So when it comes to the trans community, I've talked about this a little bit, because the problem is that, you know, transsexuals, which is what we used to be called until about 2013 when they changed it to transgender, and it actually meant we had gender dysphoria and we take hormones and we actually transition to just try to blend into society and live life as the opposite sex. Those of us that are like that, you know, a lot of them are living stealth lifestyles where most people in their daily lives might not even know that they transitioned at a younger, you know, when they were younger, or they might, you know, so they don't necessarily need to step out. And think about when you step out, you're going to get hate from the left because they hate you just as much. And then you see the ultra conservatives, they hate you too. So it's like a lose-lose situation. And why would you step out when you're living such a comfortable lifestyle in your everyday life? I mean, unless you're perpetually online, like, you know, I am at least, you're not seeing this every day in your daily lives. I always like to say that, though, is like the internet really isn't real life. I mean, it's made up of real people, but it's so not indicative of what actually happens in most people's day-to-day life. I was in North Georgia last week, and it was like so just refreshing that everybody was so kind and actually had that Southern hospitality spirit. Whereas if you were online, you would think that these people like hate me, and it's just not the case.
Yeah, no, I get that bit. And although I do live in Vegas where it's you know, different. But
well, Vegas is
but I have been
Vegas
to North Georgia, and I love North Georgia. One of my favorite state parks on the planet is in North Georgia. It's called Cloudland Canyon, and if you ever go back and you get the opportunity, it's like right Georgia-Tennessee border, and you can hike down this thing that will put you behind the fucking waterfall. And you could just sort of look out from through the waterfall, and it's really freaking cool.
Okay.
I highly
yeah, I'm gonna have to
recommend.
check that. I'm gonna have to check that out, because I mean I live in Atlanta, so I'm not far from there.
Cloudland Canyon on the way to Chattanooga.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's not far.
It's worth it, and it's like a mile freaking downstairs, which means you got to go back up the stairs. So you know,
I was gonna say,
yeah.
I was just
full
in
disclosure.
Cuba. I was in Cuba where they put us on the 6th floor, which was beautiful, overlooking the Malecon on the water in Havana, you know, in Havana. But like at night to get back up, the elevator wasn't working. There was no elevator person, so I had to hike up 6 floors of stairs to get up there. That shit was just brutal. Sarah, before we get to Gays for Groomers, is there a group called Trans Against Groomers that you run, or are you just part of Gays Against Groomers? And maybe you can get into a little bit about that whole situation, because when people started asking me my opinions and I was speaking about it, I was like, listen, the old school liberal way used to be we were open to anybody what they wanted to be. We would accept anybody for how they wanted to identify. We were cool with that. But the thing I'm against now is pushing it and actually pushing your beliefs on other people. You know what I'm saying? Acceptance is one thing, but to push your beliefs on somebody, especially kids, when Steven just mentioned too as well, his brain wasn't completely formed. I remember, man, I don't think that I got my head on square until I was like 26, 27 years old. So I stepped outside of myself and had a form of consciousness. What group are you a part of and why? Let's talk a little bit about this, because this is the part I think where a lot of people on the left go, well, you're anti-trans, you're transphobic for thinking that way.
Yes, we did have an organization called Trans Against Groomers. It was founded in conjunction with Gays Against Groomers. It was the Jamie who founded Gays Against Groomers. She's always said that she recognizes the need for trans people to step out and speak out against this stuff, and because we are some of the most powerful voices when it comes to ending what's happening in this space. But she's also one of the people that thinks that, that the trans should have never been added to the LGB because one is sexuality and one is gender, right? So they coexist in a very unique way, which is actually why, if you've seen, we started using it's LGB and then saying anti, because it signifies that relationship, that we're not the same, but we're working together on stuff. So we found it a little bit difficult to run Trans Against Groomers. We didn't have the level of content creators that like Gays Against Groomers had and stuff like that. So what we decided was that Gays Against Groomers was basically absorbed Trans Against Groomers. So anybody that was in the organization wanted to apply for Gays Against Groomers could move over, and that's what happened there. So I am still a member of Gays Against Groomers, contributor over there. And yeah, so the point is that it's fine what adults do with their bodies. Adults can do what they want. They can, act how they want, as long as it's not, influencing children. And what we've started to see, especially like drag queen story hours and taking kids to drag shows. And I like to point out, like, this is where it really affects the gay community, because drag performers are generally not trans. RuPaul at one point has gotten in trouble for saying that, being trans and doing drag was like taking performance enhancing drugs. And then, but there are now trans people that do drag. So it's kind of all encompassing, but drag is inherently sexual. It's meant to be that way. Drag can be absolutely fine for adults, but when you start adding kids to the mix, it starts bringing up the whole, pedophile groomer narrative that, the community fought so hard against back in, when NAMBLA was like a thing and trying to force its way into the community. And so that's what Gays Against Groomers is fighting against. They're fighting against this from within, because nobody can fight for gay people and say that we're not like this and fight away these stereotypes better than those that are in the community, right? And then the same thing with, wanting to transition kids. There's a lot of push right now when it comes to like gender dysphoric children and stuff like that, to be like, if you are gender nonconforming, then you're trans. Like, that's the narrative that's being pushed out there. And that's just not true. Again, the community had fought so hard to get rid of this stereotype. Like, we tried to normalize being gender nonconforming. Like, gender nonconforming is okay. But when you start to medicalize children, that's when it becomes a big issue. And that's what we're trying to fight against.
I used to work for this company called Rocco's, and they're in California, and they opened up their first Rocco's WeHo in West Hollywood. And that model was a little bit different than the normal model. It's usually an Italian sports pizzeria, upscale sports bar. That's what my company was. But Lance Bass had bought in with one of the general managers who opened up this model. And in West Hollywood, they have drag shows all the time. And I've been there several times before I took off. And this is something that I kind of expressed to people that I've said before, that I've talked to some of the men who do drag. And I said, well, what are your thoughts about drag queen story hour? And they're like, absolutely not. And they're like, this is an adult thing. This is sexuality. These people are going to screw up our gig over here. We're now going to be picked on because they're pushing this drag queen story hour on children, when it's always been about adults. It's adult time, what are your thoughts on that? I think you already kind of said a lot about it, but maybe a little bit more on top of that.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it is. That is it. Drag is a performance art for adults. It's the same as going to a strip club or going to a burlesque show. Like that's what it's meant to be. I mean, if a drag show has to be tamed down that much, it's that it can be, you know, viewed by kids, then it's not going to be as entertaining as it normally would be. Like I said, yeah, drag can be fine. It can be fun. You know, I had no issues with drag and drag performers, but you have to question a performer who's doing drag that wants to perform, that wants their audience to have children in it. And I've actually made the comment before too. I said, you know, I don't know why, because during this whole thing, we've seen that clowns are no longer a thing, and they've replaced clowns with drag queens. And so I don't know why, you know, they're using the drag as, you know, as the representatives of the gay community, because it used to be just love is love, and they're just like, you know, gay people are just like anyone else and just want to live their lives like anyone else. Why is that so wrong? But that's, you know, that's where it's going.
The natural progression of degradation and decadence in an empire in decline, man. Okay, you used to think of at least the typical TV representation of lesbians was that they had short hair and these, you know, particular like either cat frame or kind of Buddy Holly-esque glasses. Well, now everyone on the left looks like that. So in order to get some attention paid to your cause, you've got to look a little bit different and a little bit more extreme. Squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? Yeah. Well, okay, as more mainstream culture adopts whatever look, your next little squeaky wheel has to be a little bit more flamboyant than the last one, a little bit louder, maybe a little bit weirder. Maybe you got to do something really fucked up this time just to get noticed. And then you can get the conversation going. And this applies across the board to whatever ideology or religion or cause. I don't give a damn. And this is how that shit is working, because as the empire declines, more and more people are going to snap. Yeah. And more like whatever 40, 50, 60 years slow drip MK Ultra experiment we've all been living under our entire fucking lives, whatever generated mental illness in combination with however you were wired to begin with gets released, you're going to find whatever group is currently the loudest that will accept you and you belong to, that's going to allow you to get some of that squeaky wheel attention and whatever you're going to perceive as your current oppression, because there's maybe something on the other side of it. I mean, that's or at least that's the way it's looking to me in the moment. I don't know. I'm just trying to tell you what I see.
Well, you know, the phrase "more money, more problems." That's kind of what it's like here, right? Is like, we live in a society where people don't really have a lot of problems, so they have to create problems and they have to create oppression, right? And so that's what's going on here, and it is interesting, because a lot of these kids, because most of the people that are, you know, in these movements are kids and in their early 20s, but it's like the goth kids, you know, they have to be a little bit different, they have to be a little bit counterculture, but they all look the same and they all dress the same and they all, you know, act the same, except for now we have activism on top of it, and we're those kids that were goth kids are now teaching our kids in schools like how to, you know, perform activism and stuff like that.
Well, go ahead.
I saw a couple of people recently that were like, man, there's a couple of comedians that are fighting over credit for whose joke it is that the trans community is this generation's goth community. You know, that you could swap out 90% of the personality for a Columbine era goth kid to today's, like, most of the, at least the ones that were shown
Yeah, I
the
mean, it's not
marketing
the high school cheerleaders that are transitioning. It's mostly the outcasts, the people that aren't really fitting in. And what's really bad about this is a lot of it is the undiagnosed autism that we're seeing right now too, which makes people more socially awkward, and so it makes it harder for them to fit in, and so they get wrapped up into this, and maybe they think that what's wrong with them is that they're a boy, and it's mostly young girls for that reason. That's one of the issues. One of the biggest issues is the undiagnosed autism that we're seeing. And then they're not even treating the comorbidities. They're literally saying, oh, you got this, you're probably trans.
Nut allergies and autism comes from vaccines. Some people can argue that. That's why I stay away from them. But what do you say to the people who say, well, the people I know from the Bernie movement were all about, well, this is about inclusivity. This is about understanding and accepting people and teaching our kids at a young age that it's okay to be different, that they shouldn't be picked on and whatnot. And so if we incorporate this ideology at a younger age, they'll be more accepting as they grow up to people around them who are different than them.
Yeah, I mean, if you remember, like what I was talking about with like gender nonconformity, like we used to be like, some people just are just gender nonconforming. They might just be a young gay kid that likes to wear pretty things and doesn't necessarily fit the stereotypes, and that's what we the left at one point used to push to make that like normalized, be like, hey, this is cool, we're good, and now it's like that is not okay. If you show that you're gender nonconforming, then they're pushing that, maybe you're just trans. That's what's going on. That's why you're gender nonconforming. So in a lot of ways, the ideology is regressive in that manner. But we, and I hate it, because then you see conservatives, when they get out there and push the same stuff, it's like they go against, trans ideology. But then when somebody that is just gender nonconforming steps out and they get, publicity for it, then they hammer on the gender nonconforming stuff. It's like, no. We should probably be promoting gender nonconformity over, transitioning somebody, some medicalizing somebody. That should be what we look at as being okay,
Yeah, I got this video from Gays Against Groomers, and I really think it's important to play and show really quickly, because this particular lady, she's given some great advice before. I've seen her tweets and her memes for quite some time. The majority of children claiming to be trans aren't. Many of them aren't even gay. They're just normal straight kids desperate to fit in, to be seen and validated, to matter. They are under extreme peer pressure and, Steve, what's that word? Inundated.
Inundated.
Sorry,
I was muted. My bad.
Sorry, it's okay. Steve, you got to be there for me. Jeez Louise. We have a much deeper problem, and it's time to address it. The indoctrination must stop. Take a look at this video.
But why? I mean, besides the literally less than 6% of people who are actually gay, and the 0.003% of people who actually suffer from some form of real gender dysphoria, my question is to everybody else: why? Is it that important to fit in? Is it so important to fit in that you would actually cut things off of your body? My question to you is, do you realize, and I don't think you do, but most of those people in high school and in college, you'll never see again. Their opinion of you means nothing. So why go to all the lengths to fit in? But why?
Sarah?
Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely that's absolutely true. Like, there is a lot of this notion to try to fit in with your current group. That's why I think and that's why I push for stuff, push for bills across the country, that kids do stupid things to try to fit in. They really do. And so what we need to do is, you know, and then doctors manipulate parents into getting them to do stupid things. They manipulate parents by telling them that their kid will commit suicide if they don't, you know, affirm their gender and stuff like that. So we need to, you know, break that system. And again, that's why I support bills across the country to, you know, stop the medicalization of minors.
Yeah. Do you
It's the
think
only way
there
to do
ever
it.
should be an example, an area maybe, because my Fiorella, my business partner for my other show, and Kim Iverson, they had a show, and Kim had said to Matt Walsh, "Why don't we have a discussion about this on my show? If the parents have a right to decide what's best for their children, even in these rare situations," I think she said 0.003 have gender dysphoria. Shouldn't there be a small loophole? Should the parents be able to make that decision, or is it across the board all the time child abuse?
I feel
Well,
like that, just quickly, sorry, I just feel like the way that the world works, that just encourages an advancement in mass diagnosis of gender dysphoria, because
yeah,
there's an industry just waiting.
yeah, that's part of the problem is that there is a medical industry that is able to, you know, benefit from this situation. You know, probably 2-3 years ago, I was actually more on board with like the what was called the Dutch model for care, which is kind of what we would normally see. Um, I've never been on board with surgeries until 18, but I thought that there was a possibility, because there is a very rare situation where somebody, mostly a male, would go through would benefit from transitioning early. That being said, just because of how far off the rails the medical system has gone in this direction, then I don't think that we can. I think we have to put a stop to it now. We have to put a stop to it, and then put in, then we can start to see how can we actually help those very rare exceptions. Because, and I say this because I have a little bit of a tendency bias, because again, it's harder for testosterone is just such a powerful drug, that a male going through puberty makes it harder for them to ever be able to pass if they try to transition as an adult. However, a female going through regular puberty, they'll usually transition and it'll be just fine as an adult, because testosterone overrides anything that ever happened during female puberty, where estrogen doesn't override this testosterone the same way. So you get all those male features, and you can't get rid of it. Whereas, a young female doesn't necessarily have that same issue, where they can't get rid of some of the stuff that they get, that goes through puberty. I mean, if you put a young girl on testosterone, their voice changes. They can never change their voice back. Like, estrogen doesn't change the vocal cords back. So I understand that it could help some people, but like I said, at the way that our medical system is going right now, I think we need to put a stop to it, figure out what's going on. And then once we stop the social contagion aspect that's happening right now, then we can maybe go back to and look at, how can we actually help those that are actually suffering from gender dysphoria.
So what do you think the remedy would be if we stopped? What would be the procedure then? What would be the remedy moving forward to understanding it? And, maybe those rare cases where that kid might commit suicide, right? We can somehow, I understand if it's a numbers game, right? It's such a small, even the young lady from the gays from Groomer there said it 0.003%. That's very, very fucking low.
Well, and that's exactly what it is. That's the number of people that actually suffer from gender dysphoria. That's not the number of people that are getting diagnosed with gender dysphoria currently. Right now, it's well overdiagnosed, and a lot of the activists are saying that you don't even need to have gender dysphoria to be trans, which is completely insane. But if we stopped it and we can start looking at it, that's the thing. When you talk about like suicide rates and stuff like that, you don't like, honestly, you have to treat the suicidality. You have to treat the mental aspect of it. I wouldn't transition somebody just because they're suicidal. Actually, it's quite the opposite. I would probably want to make sure that they're not suicidal before they transition, because life doesn't get any easier after you transition. In a lot of ways, it gets harder. And I think that's what people need to see, is it's not like some magic here. It's not a fix for the mental issues that you're going through. If you're suicidal and you are trans, or you have gender dysphoria, transition might make that a little bit better, but you still have the underlying causes that are causing you to feel suicidal.
You said you made a comment about the sports, right? Like once testosterone hits in there, you don't agree that transitioning men to women should be able to play in women's sports. You've mentioned that before. I think that's been a big issue. I've been in a gym where a females basketball team, and just listening to them talk about it, like a junior college basketball team, and half were like cool with it, and the other half were like hell no. So it was kind of like just sitting back and observing. But what do you think about, for instance, the Green Party has a women's caucus, and there are transgender men who are transitioning to women that are in that women's caucus, or even just men who identify as women in that caucus, and they've thrown out women in that caucus themselves. What do you think the place there? I know it's a political thing, but what do you think that for society or whatnot, do you think that should be allowed? Or because it's not like sports. So
yeah. So I think it's interesting because they are, they're still like trying to take it's for women, so they're taking away a spot in that would normally, go to a biological female, and then removing people because of that is a little bit crazy in and of itself. But I personally like the Women of the Year awards and stuff like that. I think that's completely like ridiculous. But at the end of the day, I think those awards in and of themselves are completely ridiculous. It's a vanity project. But like I've done work with the Independent Women's Network and stuff like that, but I've never applied to be a fellow with them because I'm not a woman. So I think that there's organizations that are, should be based on biological sex, like Independent Women's Forum. The Green Party, I guess, they have a different set of principles. So I wouldn't go to join that caucus. But you mentioned Freedom Fest. I had to actually take an internal look at how I felt about my Freedom Fest panel last year, because it was why free speech is a feminist issue, and I was on the panel. And I was kind of like, I realized that like stuff like that is a little bit different, because if my goal is to make sure that women realize that I'm not a threat to them, what better audience to have than a feminist panel, right? Same with Vice News had a panel with Sydney Watson on it a few weeks ago, and it had 2 trans people, and I had gotten contacted by that producer to go on that as well, and unfortunately we couldn't make that happen. But it was, what people were saying is this is a women's panel, but it really wasn't. It was a Vice panel on feminist issues. So it depends on what it is and how you look at it, depending on where I would lie with that. I think that doing stuff like on those types of issues, anybody can be on those panels and stuff like that. But to be part of an organization that's designated solely for women, I'm generally not going to put myself into those situations, just personally.
Steve.
Most people require way less nuance than that, and they're going to be very, very upset with you for having put that much thought into it.
Sorry.
It's just how that shit works, man. That's just how that shit works. No, you got what, suspended and then reinstated from Twitter for saying that gender dysmorphia is mental illness and that you shouldn't stigmatize mental illnesses. And that's that kind of acknowledgement. And then not even like, it's not even a backpedal or a caveat at that, where you shouldn't even have to qualify that, by the way, I don't think we should be stigmatizing mental illness, that's how ridiculous of a position that anyone with gender dysmorphia would be in at that point. Like, I have to qualify that I don't think that you should pick on people with mental illness before I can even. Are you fucking kidding me? Like, to get suspended for that in the first place is ridiculous, but then to just have that as a starting off point has got to be frustrating as all hell.
Oh yeah, I mean, that was an interesting situation because they gave me that timeout, but I appealed it and won twice in 1 week. But that goes back to how regressive everything has kind of been, right? To where I was talking earlier, like the goal used to be to not stigmatize mental illness, just to let people kind of, to help people work on their issues and accept their mental illnesses for what they are. But then now the people with gender dysphoria get mad that you call it a mental illness because they think that, they're basically stigmatizing all mental illnesses if they think that this thing that they have is not a mental illness.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. And this is where and I hate the, this is the left or this is the right. I hate all that shit. But this is where the marketing for what people look at for the left gets in the way, because they're being told not only does normalization mean we've got to shove the most extreme elements of any community into your kid's classroom for in perpetuity. But it also means that whatever particular mental illness or mental illnesses you may have, not only are those stunning and brave, but they're also supposed to be at the forefront of humanity's thoughts before anyone thinks, moves, speaks, breathes, or what. And it's just it's not even an overcorrection of the pendulum. It's yanking the pendulum off the goddamn metronome and beating everyone over the head with it and saying, if you don't like this, you're fill in the blank phobic-ist, whatever.
Yeah, it just sounds awful, doesn't it? Like, having to walk around on eggshells is awful. I honestly, I could never imagine seeking validation, so much validation from other people like they do. Like, that's really what this is. It's like, there's so many people with such low self-esteem and such a lack of self-validation that's kind of what's pushing a lot of this right now. Like, if you don't validate me, and words are violence, if you don't bend to my whims, then you're a bad person. It's just not the way that life is.
Well, I mean, and this goes back to that slow drip MK Ultra thing that I mentioned earlier. I know a bunch of people who are like late, or I guess early on in Gen X, who are in their 60s right now, and people who are a little bit older, who are effectively one-liners from TV shows and movies and song lyrics. And like, that's it. That's their entire freaking, that's how they hang out. That's what they do with each other. That's how they riff, but that's all they are. And they filled a specific purpose for that, your standard original AC/DC audience is kind of what I'm getting at. Yeah. And then so on and so forth. So pick something that you needed to trap people culturally in to stunt their growth, limit their ability to figure out who they are, let alone have any desire for genuine self introspection, and then to tell them first that self improvement is stupid, and you shouldn't do that. That's bad for you. That somehow, it's somehow either like not masculine, or it's somehow too egocentric to want to do that. Then to tell people, okay, well, you should do that, but only by these methods. And then to kind of flip that and be like, okay, well, self-improvement starts when you're a child. So let's go ahead and remove this bit from you, or let's go ahead and add these bits to you. And then we're going to hold up, whatever your particular weirdest mental illness is at any given moment for any given group as the ideal of what humanity not only has to normalize or respect, but to elevate to some sort of current, new addition to the godhood.
Yeah. I mean, it really is. And when you actually look at how a lot of this is taking place, pushing it on children, there is I could go down the conspiracy rabbit holes with a lot of this stuff too, because when you start looking at the fact that they're basically sterilizing an entire generation of people. I mean, there's a eugenics factor to it. We don't know. Puberty blockers seem to stunt brain development, so people are easier to control. There's this notion that, I mean, they're making a lot of these, a lot of this stuff, puberty blockers, then going on to, cross-sex hormones, tends to make people more like asexual. So what really is the end goal when it comes to a lot of these things? It's really quite scary when you think what could be happening from a higher level.
Well, it's definitely not a Marxist plan. I'll tell you that one. I don't want to get into that whole situation, stuff like that. But I had to. Steve rolling his eyes, but I had to throw it out there, Steve, because that's not Marxism. And the only reason why I say that shit is because, in my line of work, going down to Latin America, whatnot, I've met a lot of conservative, socially conservative Marxists, especially in Nicaragua, where they're very socially conservative. There's two genders down there. They'll claim, don't believe in gay marriage, don't believe in abortion, whatnot. Their economics is Marxist. You know what I'm saying? But I only point that out because I'm fearful that at any time, if we kind of equate the culture wars and the, what I believe the globalist eugenics plan, the way to divide a society is with these culture issues. That we don't conflate that with the Marxism that goes down in Latin America, and we use that as a way to manufacture consent to invade them. That's why I always bring that shit up. And I know that's, since you were at the Rage Against the War Machine rally, that I can talk about this with you, because obviously, listening to your speech, and I was right there. I don't know if you saw me. I was sitting right down on the ground.
Yeah.
So
I did. I knew that. Yeah, I saw that you were there. But I mean, this is a, that's why it's a play, though. I always call it, the postmodern neo-Marxist ideal.
Okay.
Not necessarily, and people need to understand the difference between neo-Marxism and a economic Marxist system. Like, that's what people don't understand, is when you say, cultural Marxism or neo-Marxism or postmodern neo-Marxism or any of that stuff, it's not necessarily what a actual Marxist system is predicated on. Like, in theory, Marxism is simply an economic structure, has nothing to do with culture.
Yes.
But when you tie a lot of it together, there is aspects of the culture that they might use to build a, Marxist system. And even a neo-Marxist society has two classes of people. It has the elites and then the working class, which really isn't fundamentally what Marxism is about either.
Yeah. I just think it's important to point out that cultural Marxism didn't come from Marx. That's
Yeah.
what I want to. And and me seeing those people, that like literally, in Brazil, young lady came up and she handed me a Marxist book that she, been reading and whatnot and stuff. But when we closed the doors and we turned the cameras off, they had questions like, what was up with Event 201? Is this vaccine for real? Like, well, as they're serving us, it was when the doors were closed and everything, they wanted to know that information. Like, is there really a one world government society? We're starting to catch on over here in the favelas of Brazil. I'm like, okay, let's talk about this. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I kind of always just point that out because, a lot of people are still, I have some of the people we met at Freedom Fest, some of the conservatives that were there, they weren't at the Rage Against the War Machine rally. There wasn't really any of them who made it on the stage. There were two people I thought that could have had an opportunity there, maybe in the conservative or the populist right field. Mel K being one of them because she, looks into the NED and all these other things. And I love Mel, and I think she has a good grasp on what's going on. But there's a reason why they didn't make it onto the stage because I don't think they look at the war machine the way we did. Do you want to give a little bit of insight to that and how you felt kind of performing? I don't say performing, speaking at that rally and why it was important to you to go there because the energy there. I remember, seeing you before your speech and there was a little anxiety and, what I'm saying, you were hanging out with us and I was like, don't worry, you're going to kill it, and
it was fun.
I just thought it was awesome that we were all there doing this. And it was like such a, me personally, I have been pushing that coalition. I have, next week on Wednesday, Clint Russell is going to be on my show with Caleb Malpin. You know what I'm saying? After that event and after you guys spoke over there, I walked a bunch of Mises Caucus libertarians to a communist event. I mean, we had so much fun along the way. It was like, Reed kept on saying, remember, guys, these people want to kill us. So we got to be cool there. And I'm like, yeah, but that until after we get rid of the predator class. So you're safe right now. And there's going to be food there. It's a communist event. One hamburger, one hot dog only, guys. We were chuckling and having a great time. Because that is a coalition, and you talked about it. This is what the ruling class does not want. And it sucks that we had so much pushback from all these other leftist groups that performed their shit, the Answer Coalition after, where they were so like, why are we going to, they would use this frame that I believe comes directly from the CIA. I don't want to form a coalition with somebody or a group of people that we agree on one issue, but then they want to hurt me after. I'm like, nobody from the fucking Mises Caucus wants to hurt you after, you assholes. I don't give a shit about the history of this. Well, the Schiller group, you know what I'm saying? Diane Sayre spoke and Jose Vega. Well, they have a history of beating up communists in the 60s. I said, listen, dude, these people are not going to hurt you. Right now, we have to shut ourselves up, shut our mouths up, put our differences aside, and come together on the stage and talk out against this war machine. Period. Yeah. So I just want your thoughts on that event and so we can talk about politics here.
Yeah, I love that event. It was awesome. It was so important. I've been a big fan of single issue advocacy for quite a while now. Actually, it was Spike Cohen who kind of taught me more about single issue advocacy when he worked with BLM on criminal justice reform stuff, right? So you can put all of your differences aside and then work on one single issue together. And that's how, third parties, especially like the smaller groups, can actually make a difference because, you join together on these issues and work together. And what issues there? What's, ending our involvement in foreign wars is absolutely imperative. And then there was the big free Julian Assange aspect of the rally as well, which everybody there seemed to agree on as well, that we shouldn't be jailing journalists for doing their jobs. And then so It was a big thing for me because a lot of people don't realize with my advocacy I am a huge anti-war activist, I guess, because I mean I served 7.5 years as a logistics officer in the Army, and I saw firsthand what happens, and so that's why it's really important for me to speak out, given my experience, to say that we should not be fighting in other people's wars. We should bring I mean, personally, I'm a minarchist, so I believe that our government has one responsibility, and that is to protect our borders. Our army should be literally to protect our country, not our interest around the world, right? And so it was definitely a fun experience. I've never given a speech at a rally like that, because other than main stage, that was a rally. Like, what in front of the White House, it was just a rally in front of a bunch of people, and it was invigorating. But it was like, before I gave my speech, I looked around, and exactly what you said. I looked around, and I'm like, any other day of the week, half of these people would be protesting against me. I've probably seen these people protesting against me in other speeches, but today they're cheering for me. And that to me was something that was powerful, and it was really amazing. And I think that we should be able to do that type of stuff more, honestly. And that's kind of how, once you humanize somebody like that, even on those issues we disagree on, I think that brings it to the table where we can actually sit down and have a conversation instead of yelling and screaming at each other like we have been. And so I think that I absolutely loved it. And I think that the rally was so important. And it's really nice to see different groups coming together. And it was sad to see, groups on both sides of the issue, the leftist libertarians and the I don't know who it was on the the more communist side.
The
all kind of come and be like, why would
left is what the anti-imperialist left is kind of what it is. It's the leftists that were always really conscious of our foreign policy. I mean, that's what I would call myself, as an anti-imperialist leftist. But now I've kind of think I've morphed into a leftist libertarian. You know what I'm saying? Myself. So I mean, but who gives a shit? I just thought it was awesome that you were there and you were speaking, and it was great because I'd met you briefly at Freedom Fest, and that was a big event. I think it was very, very important. It was sucky to see how we were getting attacked from both sides.
Some of the optics, one inopportune picture here and there, and people just wanted to use that to frame the whole thing. And my whole question to the people that were saying all this stuff online, I wrote a piece in my Substack about the whole event. My question to the people, was, well, when's your guys' anti-war rally? Because that's the next question. What are you doing about this? Like, who are you working with to actually stop, what we're doing, stop our involvement in overseas corruption, essentially?
And they were having their rally a month later, but they started off their rally with excluding people right off the bat. And when you do that, it's really not as powerful as what we were doing over there as well. So
yeah, it'll be interesting to see how where the sides start to come out and where they stand on this new whistleblower, the leaker. Because I'm not going to call this guy a whistleblower, because he didn't really do it to blow the whistle. He was just doing it to impress his friends on.
We didn't even get to it in the fucking show yet. Holy crap, dude. They've got video of the dude sitting on his deck. Book out. Like, how to subvert your employer's spyware or whatever the fuck is sitting there. No, if you're the subject of an international manhunt or of an intelligence agency manhunt, if the Department of Defense is looking for you and you alone, what you don't do is go, fuck it, it's casual Thursday. I think I'm going to throw on a pair of workout shorts and some old t-shirt.
Sit on the deck.
Get out in the sun a little bit and get some reading in at my home address where all of the stuff that had been in the background of some of the pictures that I put up in my little Discord server that totally went under the radar for months and months and months and got no attention until the media was like, hey, did you guys know that there's a whole bunch of totally top secret war plans for Ukraine with totally legitimate troop numbers and totally legitimate troop movements that were marked you can't look at they said he was first just transcribing them and making notes and nobody bit, and then he started posting pictures and still nobody bit. So somebody from the fucking operation elbowed someone at the Washington Post or the New York Times and said, are you guys gonna do anything about this? And here we are, and now they've sheep dipped this son of a bitch. And well, I don't know, man.
Well, what they said is it was like one of the people that was in the Discord server had mentioned that it was kind of widely known that this information wasn't supposed to go anywhere. So he was giving all this information to protect his friends so that they were in the know of everything that was going on. And then one of those people started leaking it all over other social media platforms and stuff like that. And the one that got all the attention was the images about Ukraine. You know, so the images that showed troop level numbers and all this different stuff. And apparently both sides of that thought that this was some sort of psyops because one of the troop, like the images had been doctored. And so it showed that Russia had lower casualty or had higher casualties than and Ukraine had lower casualties than they were reporting. Each side reported. So neither side actually really trusted. Both sides thought it was the other side trying to throw curveballs at them, demoralize their troops and stuff like that. It was interesting. I wrote about it. I've actually written about it twice. So I'm writing now at the Post Millennial, and so I wrote about it yesterday. I put an article out about who this person was before it was even announced that he had been arrested. And then last week it was talking about the Ukraine, like the actual data that was leaked because of Ukraine and how it was kind of, everybody was like, this is just part of the information war to try to get us, the propaganda campaign to try to get us like to not, smear our side and this and that. And both sides were pointing fingers at the other side. And turns out it was, just this 21-year-old kid that had on his 25-person Discord server just trying to be a big shot to impress his friends.
Steve,
that are mostly underage.
We got about 18 minutes left, but I see you got a video ready. Sarah, can you hang out for the last 8 minutes before you dip on out?
Oh yeah,
sure.
I got you.
Steve, what do we got?
Well, this is the art of now elevated to national spotlight, yet removed from Tennessee legislature. Look, I don't know if you guys have seen this yet, and I'm not going to apologize for anything that happens afterwards. I'm not.
Justin J. Pearson, and I'm running for president of BSG. There are a few reasons that we're running this campaign this year. One has to do with representation. How can we represent all voices in a conversation? I wanted to do this by partnering with organizations from the Bowdoin Democrats to the Bowdoin Republicans. I want to bring together different voices, dissenting voices that may be more liberal or more conservative, in order that we can reach a point of sort of the radical middle.
It seemed like the NRA and gun lobbyists might win. But oh, that was good news for us. I don't know how long this Saturday in the state of Tennessee might last. But oh, we have good news, folks. We've got good news that Sunday always comes.
Justin J. Pearson, and I'm running for president.
This is something that doesn't even matter the race. The left loves to pull out this, Democrats love to pull out this Southern pastor, this black Southern pastor.
Hillary did it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It doesn't matter who it is. I mean, I thought it
Hot
was kind
sauce
of
Hillary,
hilarious.
please. Sorry, hot sauce Hillary.
I mean,
Harris tried it once, dude.
Oh,
It was
AOC tried it a couple weeks ago, and it was she sounded more like Daffy Duck than what she was going for when she was talking about
performative Rosie Perez, like she did when she was shouting down those one fucking hapless protester or whatever, and she was, listen. Fuck, oh my god, dude, it was anyway.
Yeah, I mean, AOC was like the Chinese, like talking about the Chinese space lasers.
We all know
I
whose
can't.
space
I can't.
lasers
It's
they are. We all
the dramatics, right? It's all a show when it comes to politics.
dude, that I can't. Wait, hang on. Finding the radical middle doesn't seem to have got me where I needed to be in my career. Quick change of hairstyle, a little bit of facial hair now. Hey, everybody likes a little bit of facial hair now, so let's do that. Cameras are rolling. All right, let's get to whooping.
But why do people buy that shit is what I fucking want to know. How can they not
It's
see it?
entertaining. And because, look, dude, people are willing to believe that the government didn't have eyes on a Discord server, period. Let alone a Discord server that was exclusively for sharing classified material. They're gonna believe that dude who is referred to in the article from all of 2 days ago as like this like giant aged, super yoked out what was his name in the server? OG, right?
Yeah.
As a 21-year-old Air National Guardsman with access to on the ground troop movements in okay, sure. And what? Who's gonna play him in the already made movie about it? And the brave people in the media who worked with the Department of Defense to track down this dangerous traitor. Who's gonna play him?
I think too as well with this whole Justin A. Pearson thing that we're looking at the Pentagon leaks as a narrative management operation. The same thing could be said over here as well. The fact that they suspended these lawmakers gave them such a huge platform where they can say, do this stuff. And now what did they want when they got the microphone? We want sensible gun laws. We want to eliminate, assault rifles. I'm saying their message has now been elevated so much that it almost seems like that is also a narrative management operation by suspending them.
Yeah, that's what's interesting is people act like they don't know what the Streisand effect is. Like we've seen this happen time and time again. Like this is the biggest thing is when you try to censor something, it always comes back bigger. I'll tell you, I've heard people also say with a lot of these types of things that a lot of stuff is like what's happening in like what people are doing in terms of like even the trans community, as we talked about earlier. A lot of it is this push to narrative to actually harm trans people, not to help trans people with the narrative, but to actually harm them. It's like they're pushing so hard in this one direction so that society actually moves away from that. It's the same type of thing. It's like it elevates the worst of it. And so it's actually, it's almost like to get the social conservatives to pay attention to this and then, enact their rules, which then the left would call fascist, and it could be fascist in certain ways. And
putting freaking, the half of Jesse Jackson out there and fuck it, making it so that you're trying to provoke a response
Oh yeah.
from the right. I'm not saying go out and shoot up a church today. You know,
Well, it's
I'm not
it's the next
saying do it Tuesday, but by voting season.
it's and they have to have the next generation of race baiters out there, right? I mean, that's what's going on. That's what you're seeing take place is the Jesse Jacksons and Al Sharptons are getting a little bit older, so they need people to take their spot. And push in the race narrative has become so big because people like that would have been out of job if they actually pushed for, that we actually,
Maybe
we're
that's why
colorblind and all
they're-
that stuff.
Maybe that explains the Freaknik series.
Oh yeah. I
coming
think that's
out,
what
because
I think
they've
he
gotta
saw it.
expose anyone involved in it so that their next generation of leaders can be pure.
Exactly. Now, did you see one of the big things that's not being talked about that much? I don't think I've seen it talked about other than the article that I wrote. Is one of the pieces of information that the this leaker had put out there was that the government knew about the Buffalo shooting, that it was going to happen before it happened, and they let it happen so that they could get more funding. That was one of the claims that was made. That was allegedly
That's
made in the
one
server.
of the pieces of evidence that make me say, well, why would they release that
How much information?
Well, he was
Scott Horton.
anti-government. He was anti-government. They actually said that he was like against like Waco and Ruby Ridge and stuff like that. So he was an anti-government person.
Let's go ahead and check this box in the white supremacist domestic terrorist category. Let's go ahead and check. Oh,
well, yeah.
Oh, you're not pro-Ukraine or pro-Russia. You're solely anti-government. Okay, you're just providing this information to your family so they can prepare themselves for what's coming. Okay,
And
all right,
there's
let's
videos
check.
of you shouting racist, anti-Semitic marks before shooting your rifles. That's, I mean, you couldn't write that script any better.
Any more poorly, any more hack. Like, that's what kills me about this shit. It's so bad.
I was questioning why they would release the information that they knew about it beforehand. You know what I'm saying? That was the...
Well, that was the information was weird because, I mean, because in the server he had talked about, I guess, that the government knows about a lot more stuff and lets things happen to get funding and stuff and all that. And that was the example that he gave. I don't know if he actually provided any evidence to that about the Buffalo shooter, but I mean, it had come out actually. I mean, it wasn't actually new information. There had been,
there were mainstream articles about how he'd had prior contact with law enforcement and the FBI.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but isn't that the angle
they
we're
were on his radar?
Most? Right. Where the thing that we say most, that the thing I look at now is, did he have prior contact with the FBI? That's what I learned from my class studies, that's the thing we should look at first, because there's reasons for the FBI wanting these things to happen. Number one, it justifies their fucking budget.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that, and how many of the last few shooters have we seen? The one in Colorado, the one, so the one at the gay nightclub in Colorado, and then the one in that 4th of July shooting last year. I mean, the list goes on and on. I mean, yeah, the list goes on and on, that they've literally known these people are on their radars and they don't do anything about it. Like even in a state like Colorado where they have red flag laws, that person wouldn't have been allowed to get a gun under the red flag laws, and yet he did.
I've said this for so freaking long, and it's getting like tiresome. But I mean, if you just go buy even mainstream articles and you're trying to find the most common thing about all of these mass shootings, it's not even the type of the gun. It's prior contact with law enforcement and FBI. And in every single one of the, again, this isn't, the based on their own reporting, but also based on freedom of information suits and things like that, and then based on further lawsuits from the FBI where they come out and have to admit under disclosure in court, oh yeah, these people are actually, there were, okay, out of the 16, yeah, well, 14 of them were directly employed by us, and one of them was also a dupe, and then there was his retarded cousin who thought he found friends. Yeah, that's how we were going to kidnap the governor of Michigan.
And let me say this much. It doesn't even justify their budget. It justifies their fucking existence.
Well, yeah.
So
yeah,
I want to be clear on that. Sarah, can you tell everybody, the audience out there, first of all, thanks for coming on today. I'm so glad that we met. Our patterns have crossed twice, Freedom Fest once, and then the Rage Against the War Machine, which was awesome. I'm so happy you came on. I'd like to always extend the invitation for you to come on whenever you want. It's that type of show. Stay as little or as long as you like. Bring your opinions to the table, but let everybody know where they can find you. I know you on your Twitter, you definitely have a link that has everything. It's a one-stop shop, all your interviews, all your Substack articles, but please go right ahead.
Yeah. So that's actually, just go to my website, sarahhigdon.com. And yeah, I have a links page on there that has, it's everything that, everywhere I'm at, because I'm basically on every platform. And actually, if you go to the Post Millennial and you search my name, you can actually see, like I said, I've been writing over there and over at Human Events recently. And then, yeah, Twitter. So youtube.com, rumble.com/Sara Higdon. Twitter and Instagram, it's just Sara Higdon with an underscore, like it's under my name on there. And you can find me there. And yeah, you can just find me just about everywhere. I'm on, I think, almost all platforms. Thanks for having me, though. This was fun. I'm glad we were able to make this work.
Definitely. Let's do it again soon.
Absolutely.
Oh, well,
Sara Higdon, everybody.
Heck yeah.
Awesome, right?
Awesome. Yeah.
I didn't know if Chris Leone was in the chat today. I didn't see him. I hope he gets to watch it. And then, because I love Chris and I'll always love Chris. And I know he felt like sometimes that we didn't give the transgender community a fair shake.
You know what? Chris has popped in a lot on Blunt Force Wisdom, and I think that Chris has finally realized